So to prepare the fabric for your bag, first I'm going to go over all the exterior pieces that get fusible fleece attached to them. So the gusset, the main panels, the handle, and the exterior hinge all get fusible fleece interfacing. So for the hinge, I'm going to show you, it has a 1/2 inch on either side that does not have fusible fleece. So this piece is just centered in the middle. Here's the handle. It gets centered in the middle and along one edge, one long edge. Now for both main panels and the gusset, the fusible fleece has full coverage on the back. I just wanted to talk quilting for a moment. If you want to quilt your fabric, make sure to cut your fabric a little bit larger than the template or the measurements listed in the chart and the pattern. So let me grab my pattern piece so I can show you. So I already trimmed the gusset down to size and one of the main panels. This main panel I left untrimmed just so I could show it. So this is the size of the medium main panel piece, and this is how big I cut my fabric. So just slightly larger. It does not need to be exact, but I did do, I added a 1/2 inch to the width and the length. Or you can just use this template and do a rough cut slightly larger all the way around. Like I said, it does not need to be perfect. This just accounts for any shrinkage that happens when you quilt your fabric. Okay, these are all the lining pieces for your bag. So you have a gusset, 2 main panels, a hinge, and this is the pocket. The pocket does not get any interfacing, so that I'm just going to set aside. The hinge is the same as the exterior. It gets centered in the middle here, and it'll have fabric on either side. Main panels also the same. These get the woven interfacing. And the gusset is the difference. So this gets woven interfacing for the lining, and it's going to have a 1/2 inch of fabric showing on either side, on the wrong side of your fabric. And that's just to keep the seam allowances a little less bulky when you're constructing your bag later. Next, we're going to mark the center of each edge on the right side of the exterior main panels. So I have my exterior main panels here. So they are 7.5 inches wide. So I'm just going to measure and then make a tiny little mark at 3 3/4, which is half of 7.5. And just do it right in the seam allowance. I couldn't find my dark fabric marker, so I'm just using a regular pencil, but I do recommend using something that you can iron or wash away. And then it's 6 inches wide, so half of that is 3 inches. I'm going to mark the other 2 sides, and then I will repeat for the other exterior main panel. To make the continuous bias binding, you'll need a 15-inch square. So first you're just going to fold that in half, right sides together, and finger press along the bottom on each outer edge. Open it back up, and then I'm just going to make a little mark on each edge where that center crease is. Now you're going to cut this square in half diagonally. So I have my ruler going from the top left to the bottom right. Okay, now that it's cut in half, you're going to match up these center marks. So I'm just going to flip this one, match these up. I forgot to mention it, but my fabric is the same on both sides. I'm using Essex linen, but this is right sides together. So if your fabric is printed on a single side only, make sure you're doing this right sides together. So these are the center marks that I just matched up. And now I'm going to pin along this edge. Or you can use sewing clips, of course. Okay, now that that is clipped together, you're going to sew along this raw edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance. After you've sewn along this edge here, you're going to press that seam open, which I've already done, and then turn it so that the wrong side is facing up. Next, you're going to grab your ruler and then draw lines that are spaced evenly 2.5 inches apart. And I'm starting from the long raw edge along the bottom, and then use a fabric marker. I'm using a pencil here, but you won't see these lines later. And then just keep going until you reach the top. When you reach the top edge, go ahead and draw that last line. You should have just a little bit of fabric peeking out at the top. All right, now you're going to turn your fabric so that it is right side up. And you're going to take these two outer corners and fold them in toward the middle along the center seam. So as you can see, these lines will match up, but we're going to pull these two apart so that they're offset by 1 row. So it looks like this. And then continue pulling them apart even a little bit more so that they are 1/2 inch apart. And it should look just like that. All right, I've got my ruler so I can measure. I want this to be pretty accurate. So I'm getting these lines so they are exactly 1/2 inch apart. Okay, after you have everything aligned, then you're going to pin or clip these two raw edges right sides together. So I'm just going to carefully pinch these to hold them in place. And then I'm going to use my clips to align these raw edges. Okay, after you have those pinned or clipped together, you are going to sew along this raw edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, I've sewn along the raw edge, and now this is what the fabric looks like. So it does form like a tube. Then you're just going to press the seam open. Now we're going to cut starting on one edge and just follow the line all the way around your fabric tube until you reach the end. Okay, after you've trimmed your fabric, then you are just going to fold this in half, right sides together, matching up these long edges, and then just press along the length, and you will have your bias binding all ready to go. Next, we're going to make the handle and prepare the main panel. So first, grab your handle and then you are going to fold it in half, right sides together, and match up the long edges. Press, then open that up, and you're going to fold each long edge to the center crease that you just made. And then press again. Now you're going to fold it in half one more time and press. So at this point, it should look like this, and all your long raw edges will be encased inside. Now we're just going to pin or clip this together. Make sure to align those edges very neatly. And then you're going to top stitch along each long edge. And for top stitching, don't forget to lengthen your stitch length. I prefer like a 3.5 or a 4 millimeter. And then you're stitching 1/8 inch from the edge of the fabric. Okay, so as you can see, I top stitched along either long edge. You can also add additional rows of top stitching if you like. Sometimes I will do another line of top stitching, like about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch from each edge. That's optional. Okay, now we're going to measure and make a line 1¼ inches in from each short edge. Now you can use a Hera marker for this. I'm using like a choco liner. Just make sure whatever you use here that is something that is removable, because this will be on the outside of your handle, so it will be visible. I'm just measuring in 1¼ inches and making a nice straight line. Okay, now we're going to grab one of your exterior main panels, and you should have marked the center on each outside edge earlier. And then you're just going to take your handle and center it over those center marks on either short edge. Okay, so I have that clipped in place. Now you're going to sew this down. So you're going to start along the edge here and then just sew along right on top of your stitching. Go up across this line here and then back down right on top of your stitching. In order to hold it like really nicely in place, you can also place a pin here if you want. That way it won't be wiggling around while you're trying to sew it. So just do that on either edge to secure this handle in place. Okay, so the handle is now stitched in place. I'll show you a close up here. So it's stitched down along my top stitching, across that line that I marked, and back down on top of the top stitching. Now we're going to baste the exterior main panel and the lining main panel together. So mine don't have a directional print. They look fine either way. So I have marked what I'm going to consider the top of my exterior main panel and the top of my lining, just in case yours does have a directional print so you can see. So if yours does not have a directional print, it does not matter which direction these are facing. But I wanted to show this just in case yours does. So the top of my exterior main panel is here, And then you're just going to take your lining panel, so this would be the top, and that's going to go like this. So the top is actually facing toward me for the lining, and the top for the exterior is facing away from me. So you're going to put those two together and pin or clip them together. And then we're just going to sew around the outside edge to baste them together. So just sew with a large stitch length and use a very small seam allowance. Okay, so I've basted these two pieces together, and this is what it should look like from either side. So top part of my print is going like that, and then if I flip it over, the top of my directional print would be here. So they're opposite from each other. Okay, to make the gathered pocket for your bag, you'll need your pocket piece. And then we're just going to turn it to the wrong side. And what you want to do is fold the top edge down, wrong sides together, by 1/2 inch and then again by another 1/2 inch. And I was just going to show you how I like to do this. So to get a really even and neat fold, I use my ruler to measure a 1/2 inch. And then I'm using a hair marker here, which is really just like a tool that makes a crease in the fabric. And then I mark the line 1/2 inch from the top raw edge. So it's probably hard to see, but it just leaves a nice indentation there. If you don't have a hair marker, you can just use like a fabric marker or chalk pencil, or you can even just kind of eyeball it. This does not need to be exact. Now I'm going to get my pressing mat. I'll press it down by 1/2 inch and then again by another 1/2 inch. Okay, so now I'm just going to put a few clips on to hold it in place. And next, what you want to do is top stitch along this inner fold all the way across. Okay, so I have sewn that down, as you can see, and this just creates a casing for the elastic, which I have here. So grab your elastic piece, and then you're going to thread a safety pin onto one end. Now just thread your elastic through the fabric using the safety pin as a tool to kind of push it through. And you want to do that until your elastic is even on one edge here. So my elastic is even with the edge of the fabric on this side. And then what you want to do is just baste this in place right here so you can continue stretching this out. Okay, so I've stitched it down at this end, and then I'm just going to continue pulling this through, and this will create some gathers. Now you're going to stretch this elastic so that you have 1 inch outside of the fabric. I'm just going to measure that. Okay. So I have 1 inch here, and then I'm just going to pin it in place and baste this end down. Okay, so now that both ends of my elastic are basted down, I'm just going to trim off the excess elastic. And now we're going to baste this onto the back of our main panel. So grab your main panel, the one that has the handle, And so if you didn't watch the previous step, I popped a pen in here to denote what would be the top part of a directional print. Mine is not directional, so it doesn't matter, but I did this so you can see which way to face yours in case yours is. So this would be the top part of my directional fabric here. And then your pocket will be underneath like this. So it will be aligned along the bottom here. So I'm just going to flip that over. This denotes the top edge of my directional fabric if the lining had a directional print. So what you're going to do is, oop, making a little cameo from my kitty. This is Eleanor. Say hi, Eleanor. She woke up from her nap and now she wants to know what's going on. Okay. So you're just going to pin or clip this in place. Make sure that the bottom is aligned. Now it will have a little bit of tension. That's okay, that's normal. And when you complete your bag, after it's bound and turned right side out, that will correct itself. So don't worry if yours looks a little bowed like this from the elastic. That is totally fine. So what we're going to do is keep clipping this in place. I like to do these straight edges on the sides first. And then along the bottom, you're going to have these gathers how you like them and just clip those down in place. After you do that, you're going to baste this pocket onto your main panel. So to do that, you're just going to sew along the outer edge using a basting stitch. So get as close to the edge as possible. All right, after you've basted the pocket on, it should look like this. And then you can just trim off the excess fabric on the corners here. Now you can set this main panel aside for now. Before you install the zipper, the first thing you need to do is to get your exterior and your lining gusset pieces. And then you want to cut them 1.5 inches from the top. So now you'll have 2 pieces. So this is the top of my fabric, and this will now be gusset A, and this piece will be gusset B. So repeat this same thing with your lining gusset piece. Next, you're going to take the zipper, and then for this part, you just need gusset A. So place the zipper right sides together along the bottom edge of the gusset A piece. Now you're going to baste along the bottom edge of the zipper. Okay, next you're going to take the lining gusset A piece, and then you're going to line up the bottom edge of gusset A with the bottom edge of your zipper. Pin or clip this together, and then you will sew along this bottom raw edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance and a zipper foot. Okay, now that these are sewn together, you're going to press both of your fabrics away from the zipper. Now you're going to repeat the same process to attach the remaining gusset B pieces to the opposite side of the zipper. So I'll show you how to do that now. So first I have my exterior gusset B piece. This is the top of the gusset B piece. So this is where these two were attached before I cut them. And you're going to take your zipper tape and put it right sides together along the top of that gusset piece. After you have it all clipped together, then you're going to baste along the top of the zipper tape to attach this zipper to your gusset B piece. Okay, now that that is basted on, lastly, you're going to take your lining gusset B piece and then align the top of that piece to the top edge of your zipper. Then you're going to pin or clip along this top edge and then sew it in place using your zipper foot attachment and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Next, you're going to press the fabric panels away from the zipper. Then you will baste around the outside edge of the zipper panel in order to hold the exterior and lining fabrics in place. After that, top stitch along each side of the zipper. To hold the edges of the fabric together, I just flip the panel to the back and push the lining out so that the edges are aligned with the exterior fabric, and I just use clips to hold it together. Okay, so here is the completed zipper panel piece. As you can see, I've basted all the edges together along the outside, and then I've top stitched along either side of the zipper. To assemble the gusset, you're going to need both of your hinge pieces, and then you'll also need your zipper panel that you just made. So first, grab your lining hinge and lay it right side up, just like that. The zipper panel will go right on top, and I'm aligning the short edges on one side. Oop, don't clip it yet. And then your exterior hinge will go right sides together with the zipper panel on top. So pin or clip these together now, and you're going to sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if your fusible fleece is centered, you should essentially just follow the outside of this. Okay, after you have sewn these pieces together, the hinge pieces are going to be pressed away from the zipper panel. So just press those. Then you're going to top stitch along this seam right here on the hinge. Okay, next you're going to take that exterior hinge and line it up with the opposite end of your zipper panel. So just align these short edges. And again, you're going to sew these together along this short edge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After you sew that, then just again press the hinge away from the zipper. Okay, so this is what your gusset should look like now. It's essentially a ring, and then you're going to have your lining hinge like a flap, just like that. So next you're going to open up that lining hinge and then fold over the fabric to the wrong side by 1/2 inch, which should just be right up to the edge of your interfacing. Then you're going to fold it over so it just covers your stitches, this line of stitching right here. and then pin that in place. All right, now you're going to sew along, top stitch along this seam. So to do that, I typically sew it just like this on my machine. So you just kind of push the gusset out of the way as you sew, but top stitch right along the edge of this hinge right here. Okay, so this is what your gusset should look like at this point. Top stitched along here and just made sure to catch the lining hinge on the back side. So to go on to the next step, you can just turn this right side out. Okay, next we're going to attach the bias binding to the gusset. So you'll need your gusset and your bias binding, of course. And then you're just going to attach the raw edge of your binding to the raw edge of your gusset. And then pin or clip it in place all the way around. Okay, when you reach the beginning of your binding, you're just going to overlap the two by 2.5 inches. So to do that, I'm going to use this clip here to just mark where my binding starts. Then I'm going to put this one over top. So the edges start to overlap right here. And then I'm just going to measure 2.5 inches beyond that and trim it. Okay, so this is what it should look like at this point. Now we're going to attach the binding ends together so it'll be a continuous piece. So to do that, you're just going to unclip or unpin a few of these and then carefully just pull these off to the right like this. Make sure it does not get twisted. So for the top one, I'm opening it with the right side facing out. And then this bottom one, again, making sure it's not twisted at all. You're just going to open it so the wrong side is facing up. And of course, as I've mentioned before, mine does not have a right or wrong side as far as the fabric, but it does have a right or wrong side in that there are seams on the back of this. So just make sure that yours is right sides together here. Okay, now where the two of these overlap is a square shape, and we're just going to draw a diagonal line from the top left of the square to the bottom right of the square. So I just mark both of the corners and then use a straight edge to connect those two. Now you're going to pin these two pieces together, and then you're going to sew directly on top of this line that you just drew. Okay, so I've sewn directly on top of that line. And then the next thing to do is just to trim beyond this line of stitching so there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance beyond it. And typically before I do that, just to make sure nothing got twisted or anything and that I did this correctly, I'll just kind of do a dry run to make sure it's going to look correct. So that looks fine. I'll go ahead and trim it. Now you want to press the seam open. Then you're just going to reattach the bias binding by matching up those raw edges again. Then pin or clip it back in place. And after you get it how you want it, you're going to sew all the way around, and you're going to use a scant 1/4 seam allowance. A scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the reason for that is that these stitches will be visible on the back of your gusset, and later we're going to cover them up by doing a full 1/4 inch seam allowance when we construct the bag and put everything together. So if you do a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance now, these stitches will be hidden in your final bag. Okay, so the bias binding is attached all the way around, and it should look like that. Now you're going to do the exact same process on the opposite side of your gusset. So use the rest of your bias binding. You will have probably a bit left over depending on the size you're making. And just attach it all the way around on this side as well. Okay, the next step is to attach the gusset to the main panels. So to do that, first you're going to need to find the center points on your gusset. So first of all, you're going to line up the seams on your hinge on the gusset. So just match up these seams. And broke a clip. And then you could pin or clip those together. Now what you're going to do is flatten this out. I'm going to move the zipper so it's on the top here. Flatten it out and then just finger press on the edges along the top and bottom. And that'll make a nice crease. And then you're just going to mark those center points. I'm going to be using pens to mark my center points, but you could also use a fabric marker and just make a mark in the seam allowance right on that crease on your lining fabric. So you will have 4 of these marks total. Okay, now that I have those 4 center marks on my gusset, I'm going to unpin this. Now you're going to match up these marks that you just made to each other. I'm going to clip them together again and just repeat that same process. I'm going to flatten this out and make 4 creases on the outer edges again and mark those points. Okay, now you should have 8 marks on your gusset. Looks something like that. Now we're going to attach the gusset to the main panel, the top main panel, so the one with your handle and the pocket underneath. The pocket underneath should have the bottom edge facing away from you, just like that. So take your gusset and you're going to align the shorter edge of the gusset, so above the zipper, with the main panel. And these are going to be right sides together. So I'm taking the hinge part of my gusset and I'm aligning it to the center mark furthest away from me on the main panel piece. And then I'm going to clip these together. Now are you going to do that with the other 4 center points? I'm just going to pop this right, oops, wrong side up. So this center point with this one, And then I'll do the sides. So for these, it'll just be the very center of your handle. Okay, so I've matched up all my center points. These are right sides together. Now I'm going to continue to clip around the edges. When you get to these curves around the corners, you're going to need to clip into the seam allowance of the gusset just so you can ease this fabric around the curve of the main panel. And that'll help it lay flat and prevent any puckers from happening. So I just snip once, like right in the middle of the curve, and you can see I didn't clip into my stitches, just beyond that. And then I'll do as many as it takes, but I'm going to do, so the one in the middle and maybe like 2 more on each side. And they're about maybe a 1/2 inch or so apart. And then this will help this kind of fan out, and you can align these edges and clip them together. If you need to do more snips to make yours lay nicely and go around the corner, make as many as you need. Just look something like that. Okay, so I have this all clipped together. Use as many clips as you need. I usually use a ton. So the next thing to do is to sew the gusset to this main panel piece. So earlier we stitched a 1/4 inch seam allowance on our gusset when we attached this bias binding. Now you're going to do just the full 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you're going to go all the way around, flatten this gusset and get it out of the way as you sew around the gusset, and use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Take your time and just go slowly around these curves. Okay, so now the gusset is attached to this main panel, and we're going to do the same thing with our remaining main panel. So before you do that, just make sure that you open the zipper. You can open it all the way you want, or you can just open it a little bit, but we'll need it open so we can turn the bag right side out. Okay, so place your main panel piece down. So if your main panel has directional prints, you're going to want the top of the lining print, which my top is here, face it away from you, and the top of your exterior print, which mine is this end, that should be facing towards you. So the top of your lining print is going to get aligned with the hinge end of the gusset. So I'm going to match up these 2 center marks. And then the top of my exterior, it gets aligned with the front of my bag, so like where the zipper opening is. So match up all center marks, just like you did before. And then you're going to do the same thing. Just clip everything together and make little snips in the seam allowance of your gusset to get around the curves. Okay, now your bag should look something like that. Oh, there's my kitty again. Say hi, Eleanor. This is the time of day where she needs to be constantly petted, so just ignore the kitty in the picture. So this is what your bag should look like now. The gusset is all attached. Then you're just going to open up the zipper the rest of the way. And you're going to flip the bias binding up and then just clip it in place all the way around one of your main panels. Okay, now that it's all clipped in place, you're going to sew it down. And to do that, it's much easier if you sew it with the main panel facing down. So you're just going to top stitch all the way around and do it like 1/8 inch from the fold in this seam right here. Okay, this is what the bias binding looks like after it's been attached. And now you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So I've already clipped it in place. And just don't forget to sew with the main panel down against your machine. Okay, so the binding is attached on both sides now. And now we just need to flip this all right side out. And after that, I'm going to show you how to make these edges nice and crisp. Okay, so it's all right side out. When you're turning yours right side out, make sure you really push these corners out. Push them out very firmly. And then I like to kind of flatten out the seams and press them really well with my iron. And that just gives it a really nice shape. So now that is a completed bag. Thanks for watching. If you made a Lucy train case, I would love to see a picture of your finished project. You can find me on Instagram or on Etsy.